Achal, many have probably asked you why you wanted to revisit the partition. What do you say to them?
I would say that partition is a process, and it has not ended with the generation that witnessed it, but has definitely survived and persisted not only in the geopolitics of the subcontinent but also within families. So I think that I wanted to understand how it had continued on into the present.
Did you self censor while writing this book?
I don't know if I self censored, but I had to be very careful about the things that I was writing about because one can see shades of the past persisting in the present. And I think that partition needs to be seen in a very particular context, and it should not be mistaken with communal violence in general, because partition violence existed from a very particular historical context. So I think I was quite careful as to how I presented the stories, yes.
A story from the partition and one which is in the book that refuses to leave you.
There are numerous such stories, but I think the one story I think about a lot is a story in the chapter on material memory, which is of a Pakistani woman and an Indian man who fell in love, and how sometimes this border between us is very crippling, particularly when we want to connect to one another, but we find its invisible forces resisting. And I think the great lengths that they took to be together and continue to be together is very powerful for me. You know, they talk about the power of their passports sitting next to one another. And that is just, it gives me goosebumps when I think about it even now. I think that story showed me that this is a version of the future that can happen. Maybe not, for everybody falling in love across the border, but I just think that breaking down walls and finding some sort of connection to those across the border.
Actually, you've spoken about the inheritors, the subsequent generations who've not witnessed the partition, but whose families have. How does the grief of partition affect them?
I think it takes time for that to come to the surface, firstly. It's not something they think about often because it isn't a physical thing that impacts. It's not like an amputated leg, right? But I think the minute you become invested in it, the smaller ways that partition has persisted, the kind of invisible, intangible ways, the minute you realize that maybe your grandparents are from the other side of the border and you may never be able to visit that place or step on that soil with dignity, it really impacts a lot of people because it hinders them visiting their origin. So I think that grief manifests in different ways, and it doesn't always look the same.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.